Ever feel like you absolutely know your stuff, but the top marks just seem out of reach? Well, today we're going to change that. We are going to take a real AQA GCSE Biology question about the brain, and we're not just going to find the answers. We're going to deconstruct it, think like an examiner, and use the official mark scheme to make sure we nail every single point.
So, this is what we're diving into. Question 06. It's all based on this one diagram of the brain, figure 7. But don't let that fool you. It's going to test you on everything from basic functions all the way up to some pretty complex evolution. It might look a little intimidating at first, but trust me, we're going to break it all down step by step. 14. That's a lot of marks for just one question. Our mission today? Figure out the exact strategy to capture every single one of them. No points left behind. Let's get into it.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll deconstruct the question itself. Then we'll get familiar with that brain diagram. After that, we'll scoop up the easy marks before we tackle the trickier how questions. And then the big one. We'll break down how to master the 6 marker. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with a key takeaway you can use for pretty much any exam question.
Okay, first up, deconstructing the question. Honestly, this is the biggest and most important mindset shift you can make. It's about learning to stop thinking like a student who just knows the answer and starting to think like the person who's actually marking your paper. See, it's not enough to just have the biology knowledge floating around in your head. The real secret to exams is proving that you know it, using the exact language and the exact structure that the mark scheme is looking for. That's the key we're going to unlock today.
Right. Before we can answer anything, we need to get our bearings with the diagram they've given us. So that brings us to section 2, mapping the brain. Here it is. This is our map for this entire question, figure 7. Before we even dream of answering a question, we need to be clear on what labels A, B, C, and D are actually pointing to. And here's a tip. You don't need to know everything all at once. For the first couple of questions, we just need to zero in on 2 key areas. That's label A, the cerebellum, which is all about balance, and label D, the cerebral cortex, which is the part that does the conscious thinking and decision-making. All right, let's get some points on the board. Time for section 3, quick marks. Think of these as the easy wins. They're recall questions designed to test your core knowledge and, get your confidence up right at the start. Okay, first up, question 6.1. It's just for 1 mark, and it asks, which part of the brain becomes more active if a person balances on 1 leg instead of standing on 2 legs? And you've got the options A, B, C, or D. And the mark scheme is super clear on this one. The answer is A. See that keyword? Balances? That is a direct signpost pointing straight to the function of the cerebellum, which, as we saw, is labeled A. It's a simple link. Keyword in the question, function of the brain part, done. Next, let's look at 6.2, another 1 marker. Name the part of the brain that is responsible for making a decision. This time, no multiple choice. You've got to pull the name out of your memory. And for a question like this, precision is absolutely everything. The mark scheme is looking for the specific term cerebral cortex. Now, it does say cerebrum is also an acceptable answer, which is good to know, but using these exact terms is what locks in that mark for you. Okay, with those easy recall marks safely banked, let's level up. On to section 4, explaining the how. These are the questions where you can't just state a fact, you've got to describe a whole process. So here we go, question 6.4, worth 3 marks. Describe how the brain receives information about light entering the eye. You should include the names of structures in your answer. Now, did you spot the clues? The command word is describe, and it specifically tells you to include the names of structures. That's the exam basically giving you the instructions on how to get full marks. A 3-mark question like this almost always breaks down into 3 clear steps, with 1 point for each. And here they are, straight from the mark scheme. First, you need to say that cells in the retina are the things sensitive to light. Second, that this detection creates an impulse that goes along a sensory neuron. And third, that impulse travels down the optic nerve all the way to the brain. Retina, sensory neuron, optic nerve. 3 keywords, 3 marks. Easy as that. And now, the main event, the big one, the question that can really separate the grades. Welcome to section 5, mastering the 6 marker. For this, structure isn't just important, it's everything. And here it is, for a whopping 6 marks. Explain how birds that detect UV light have evolved from birds that could not detect UV light. The key command word here is explain. That means you have to give the reasons why. You've got to connect cause and effect in a logical story. Now, for any 6-mark question about evolution, this right here is your golden ticket.
It's a simple 3-step framework you can always use. Start with variation, then explain the survival advantage, and finish with reproduction and inheritance. Let's walk through it using the exact points from the mark scheme.
Okay, let's apply that framework. Step 1 is variation. Where did this new ability even come from? Well, according to the mark scheme, it all kicks off with a random mutation in the DNA. This mutation leads to a new or different protein, which creates a new visual pigment. And boom, that results in variation in the bird population. Suddenly, some birds can see things that others can't.
So that leads us to step 2, survival advantage. Why is this mutation actually useful? Well, the mark scheme points out that these birds could now spot things like certain fruits or even mammal urine, which reflect UV light. This gave them a massive advantage in finding food, which meant they could outcompete the other birds who didn't have this mutation. And that brings us to the final crucial step, inheritance. Because these birds were finding more food, they were more likely to survive and reproduce. And here's the key part. They passed on that successful allele or gene for UV vision to their offspring. The mark scheme confirms that over many, many generations, this process, which we call natural selection, is what drove the evolution of this trait. Okay, let's wrap this all up in our final and maybe most important section, your exam takeaway. This is the big idea that you can take from this one question and apply to pretty much your entire exam. Look, here's the bottom line. You might walk into that exam hall knowing the simple fact that birds evolved to see UV light. But to get all 6 marks, you have to explain how they did it, using the exact language the examiner is looking for. That means a detailed 3-step story with those magic keywords: mutation, survival advantage, and natural selection. That's the difference between just knowing your biology and proving you're an expert.
And there you have it. That's the blueprint for how to take apart a complex 14-mark question. We went from simple recall to description, all the way to that big extended explanation. So the only question left is, what exam question should we break down next? Let me know what you think.